Welcome to Anxious for Nothing, Session 3 from the Point Church, based on Philippians chapter 4, verses 4 through 7. And here, in Session 3, we arrive at the focus of Max Lucado's video series, as well as the book Anxious for Nothing, verse 6. Let me read it for you. Be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. Once again, we express thanks to HarperCollins and Study Gateway for making this study available at no charge during this time of uncertainty and, yes, even anxiety. I'd like to begin tonight by taking a close look at that word, anxious. Now, Max Lucado has already mentioned this in one of the earlier videos, and if you go back to the book, here's what we find from Max Lucado. The word anxiety comes from a Latin root that means to choke or to squeeze. Its strong grip interrupts your sleep, chokes your energy, and harms your overall well-being. Anxiety is not so much the onslaught of a storm as the continual threat that one is coming. It's a big heap of what-ifs. Anxiety is a close cousin to fear, but the two are not twins. Fear sees a threat, while anxiety imagines one. I've always loved Max Lucado's ability and skill at putting words together to really explain deeply the meaning and let us really get that meaning of the term, in this case, anxiety. Another Bible commentator, Warren Wiersbe, writes this: in the Greek, it means to be pulled different directions. And then Wiersbe draws the same conclusion as Max Lucado when he talks about the Old English root, which means to strangle. Well, make no mistake, anxiety is not a good thing. It's clear that anxiety can destroy us. But in times like these, how do we be anxious for nothing? We've already explored verse 4, which points to the importance of finding our joy in the Lord rather than in our circumstances. Last week, we were reminded from verse 5 that we can respond calmly in the midst of chaos because the Lord is near. And we also remember that people are watching and will notice how we respond. Well, in both of these sessions, we saw just how important it is that we keep our focus on the Lord rather than on these difficult and trying circumstances. Well, now, Paul continues with some very helpful advice that, if we choose to follow it, will help us on a very practical level. As Max pointed out in the video, Paul points us to prayer, but he is not referring to some quick, fast food, I need help and I need it now kind of exercise. No, in fact, Paul uses 3 different terms, which in turn offer 3 different perspectives on prayer, and we would be wise to make note of them. If you've watched Session 3 in the video series, you've already seen Max Lucado make reference to this. Noted Bible commentator that we've mentioned before, Pastor Warren Wiersbe, and many others also make the distinction, these 3 words and the 3 different perspectives. In fact, as we will see, Jesus himself takes the same view of prayer that Paul articulates here. Those 3 terms are prayer, supplication, and thanksgiving. Prayer, supplication, and thanksgiving. all of which should be part of that practice that we simply refer to as prayer. Well, let's look at the three terms. Prayer. This term has always carried with it the idea of approaching God with reverence, with adoration, in an attitude of worship. We recognize the greatness of God. He is big enough to take care of this problem and to take care of us in the middle of this problem. Do you remember Jesus' model prayer, what we often refer to as the Lord's Prayer? It began, "Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name." Hallowed, or just as we would say, hallowed. And what that word means is treated with reverence. That's the starting point, as Jesus taught us, of prayer. Prayer begins with worship. The second term that Paul gives us here, supplication, telling God what our need is. Let your requests be made known to God, he goes on later in this verse. But included in this word supplication is an attitude of humility. I humbly tell God what it is that I need. Jesus also included that in his model prayer. Give us this day our daily bread. Supplication, humbly letting our requests be made known to God. And the third term, the third perspective that Paul gives us is thanksgiving. How often do we pray? Perhaps even seeming to make demands rather than humble supplications. Yet God hears us and delivers us, and then we just kind of go on with our lives. We're reminded of when Jesus healed the 10 lepers. And by the way, that's a big deal, healing leprosy. He healed 10 lepers, and only one of the 10 came back to express thanks. And Jesus said, "Where are the other 9?" As a grandpa, I love getting gifts for the grandkids. I love it. And I love it when they get on the screen, when we're having those video conferences. I love it when they get on the screen and say, "Thank you, Grandpa." Now, it's not so much to think, "Wow, I'm the greatest grandpa ever." Okay, I may or may not think that from time to time. It's not so much to say, "Wow, I just nailed it with that totally awesome gift." Although I may or may not think that from time to time as well. It's really more a sense of delight in knowing that I was able to bring that grandchild a little bit of joy through that gift. I think God finds delight in knowing from us that he has brought us joy through the answering of a prayer, through the giving of a gift to us. 3 words, 3 perspectives, and perhaps used for triple emphasis. Be anxious for nothing. In times of trouble, prayer, supplication, thanksgiving. And here's the payoff. He goes on to talk about that peace that passes understanding. We'll look more closely at that next week. But for the moment, think about this. Peace is the exact opposite of anxiety. Paul's advice is good advice if we choose to follow it. Be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be known to God. Be careful. Be safe. Be blessed. And know peace.